Hello and welcome to this webinar. My name is Stefan Lindblad. I'm an illustrator and graphic designer and I live and work in Stockholm, Sweden. In this webinar I'm going to show you how I created my own coloring book for adults. And the whole webinar is going to be how to create a coloring book. And I'm gonna, as I mentioned, use my own coloring book as a pretty great example for how to create it actually. And you can see the title of my own book. It says Stockholm, that's the capital in the town where I live in, and it's an urban town, and I have a mix of images that I put together in as a story, which I see it as snapshot stories for this book. And I'm going to use three programs as I go through this webinar, and one of the programs are going to be Corel Photo Paint X8, which with X8 now have the possibility of a darker interface. And I'm also going to use Pantone, also an excellent illustration program. And I'm also going to show you the program called, let's see if we have my file there. I'm also going to show you CorelDRAW, of course, and you can also see a couple of bullet points here that I've written down what we're going to go through in this webinar. I'm going to show you how I created the drawings for this book, and one way of doing it, and also I'm going to mention a little bit about color. It's not going to be any color management hefty webinar, but we always have to talk about color. Never underestimate its importance, and because we're always using color in any graphics program, whether we believe it or not. I'm also going to talk about interior of the book, and the interior, of course, is the drawings. That's going to be the interior, which is going to be the main big part of this book. And also the cover of the book, of course. And we're also going to be talking about sexy stuff like trim, bleed and margins. And then we're going to talk about something also extremely sexy, which is PDF, portable document format. And a few other things along the way, as I said here, as you can see in front of you. And just let me mention here that many people who create coloring books, when I hear people talk about them, they use drawings, and they are using and then they remaking them using vector lines. And some might use CorelDRAW like I do every day, and some people might use a program from any competition out there. But the main thing is it's about vectors. And but the thing is, with making any kind of picture book, you don't have to do it in vector. It's wonderful to do it in vector, of course, but sometimes when I hear people talk about making coloring books, it is as if it's super important sometimes that you make your pencil drawings into vector drawings in CorelDRAW or the program called illustrator or whatever. But you don't actually have to. And for my drawings, I've actually decided not to use CorelDRAW for this matter. I've many times used CorelDRAW for making tons of different kinds of illustrations on a yearly basis as an illustrator and graphic designer. So I am not against vector illustration at all. The only thing is I used primarily Photo Paint and Corel Painter to make all my drawings for this coloring book for adults. And one of the things that we have to think about when we're talking about creating an image in Painter or Photo Paint is that we can see a difference right away here actually. Now we're in Corel Painter 2016. And if you look at what kind of information we have in front of us here now, it says new image. You could name the image name, and you can also use with what type of canvas, and I'm going to use the Painter default modified, as you can see in front of you there. And I also set this is not the setting I necessarily use for this coloring book. I'm gonna go through a little bit from the beginning. But you see the width and the height and then the resolution. And these are actually very important stuff here, what we see in front of us. Another thing that you will see when we go to photo paint here, and I just like to mention this here, when you're doing images in drawings and digital art in Painter, you probably do it using RGB for many various reasons and many obvious reasons. You're working in RGB colors and color space. But many times when you're working with images that are going to go to print, you can actually send images that are in RGB and send it to the printer who's going to print the book. And if the printer says yes, fine, send them in RGB, and we're just gonna and that's fine. What they're not telling you is maybe that they will, let's see if we can make it a little smaller again. What they're not telling you is that most probably is going to convert those images into grayscale. And for example, if you're working in photo paint, you can take any kind of image, doesn't matter what color space it is, you just go over to image in the menu, and then you go down to this where it says convert to grayscale. But we don't have to immediately convert everything here now. But let's say if you would do all images in Painter, you could actually open the Painter files, and the file format for Corel Painter is .rif, as I call them. So you can actually open a Corel Painter RIF file in Corel Photo Paint, and when you do that, you can then use batch process. For example, you can actually, let's say if we open here the recorder, you can actually open one image, and then you can record every step you do, unless if you haven't done this kind of step before. And when you start the recording, where it says here on the red, you just click record, and then you go to and do everything that you convert to grayscale. And then after that, when you've converted every images, if you have one or hundreds, it doesn't matter, or more, then you just then they're converted. But you do that with one image, only one image initially, and then you go to file, you go to batch process, and because you saved over here, if you go here a little bit, when you're finished, if you save your script, which in this case would be doing open convert to grayscale, and then save that script, would then do in batch process. And I won't stay so much with batch process. I just want to mention this for you if you happen to come into this situation that you have a lot of RGB images that you, for various reasons, did in Photo Paint, or for that matter in either Painter or Photo Paint. You just add the files here, click this little button here where it says add files, and you can then add all the images that you want to convert. So for example, for my book, which is a book of 116 pages, means that 54 or 58 of those pages are actually illustrations, and placed on every odd page. And so I just open all these images, and they open here in the list in the top form here, and then here where it says list of scripts, I just open. When I open it, when images are here, then it will activate. You can click the other one, which is grayed out here. It says, actually, if you look closer, it actually says add script. And then you just add the script that you saved and just recorded previously here. And this could actually go very quick. And then you just click which folder to save it, so you get it into the correct type, and save as type is TIFF. Many times it says AVI by default, so you just change that to TIFF or something like that, and TIFF is what you want, and then you click play. What then happens is is that in less than a minute, maybe just half a minute, all your images, let's say if you have 100 images, all those will probably convert to grayscale within even half a minute. So it goes extremely fast. So you save a lot of time there. If you would have sit and done that convert, manually image by image, we talk about an hour or maybe more. Actually, it takes much longer than you first think it's going to cost, because you're going to repeat steps and you're going to save it in the folder and everything. That's why I tell people go batch processing. So okay, so now we talked about that, and the thing is that the difference, as I said, between Painter and PhotoPaint is that in PhotoPaint you can actually select to use grayscale already from the beginning when you're creating a new image, and then of course you also here select 300 dpi as a resolution. You can see that the width here is 700 and 400. That doesn't have anything to do with the image that I would do for my coloring book. That is actually for a totally different image that I did. But the thing is, what I'm going to do is that even before I started doing my drawings, I started to think about what kind of format am I going to use for my book. And I live in Europe, for example, and not only for example, I live in Europe, and I live in a country where we talk metric and centimeters and millimeters. So most definitely I would probably have just go for a book that would be an A4 format. But because my book in particular was going to be, if people buy it in Europe, it's probably and it's going to be on print on demand actually, and it is on print on demand. So I know that it will probably be, when it sends to print, it's going to be printed in various places. So I decided to go with inches, and go with inches. Change the name here quite a lot, but I'm also going to choose letter. And because I have letter, and I saw that the printer is going to use the format that I was going to print the book is going to be in a letter size. It's quite similar to A4 in size, not exactly the same measurement, but they look a little bit similar when you look quickly, but they are a little bit different. So I went for a letter, and also an 8.5 by 11 inches, 300 dpi, and 8-bit grayscale. And that's only the interior. I mean, you see the color image here behind you, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about the interior, the black and white images that I'm going to do. So look now here to the right. You see the color palette here, the swatches and everything. What happens now is when I click OK here, you see that the color palette immediately changes. What that is actually, it's going to be the palette, because it's grayscale. It's 100% black, so to speak, and then it goes back over to 100% white, if you can say that. So it's actually from black and white and all the shades of gray in between. So that's what I want. So I'm just gonna close this one here, and so now I have an image that is 8.5 by 11 inches. So if I would import a drawing here now and redraw that, I'm going to show a couple of things later on here, or if I'm going to create something here from start and send to print, it actually isn't good enough to just leave it as 8.5 by 11, because what the printer says is that's the one that you're going to hold in your hand, but a printer wants you to use to think about trim, bleed, and margins, like I said in my first bullet points. So that's what we are going to go through here now in this webinar. Okay, so now I'm just going to import. I'm going to show a couple of things how I made my coloring book. This guy, for example, he's actually not in my book, but this is a pencil drawing that I made well, in my sketchbook. I'm just going to hold down the shift key here now and drag him up in size. So what I'm actually now going to do is to redraw this illustration, this drawing. So this is one of the ways how I did with some of my drawings for my coloring books, and some I actually draw just from start to finish using Corel Painter and Corel Photo Paint. But some of them I did this way. I sat and draw and then redrew them, because what I'm after now, of course, because it's going to be a coloring book, I just want the outlines, because I want the people who are going to color the book to just have to think about the outlines, and they themselves will put the shadows and everything else. Okay, so what is now important to think about is that some parts of this illustration here and this illustration document will of course be cut and never seen after it has been put together in a final book. And what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the bleed and the trim. And the bleed and the trim is that, as I mentioned, here for example, if we go to a letter size here now, 8.5 by 11 inches, that's the final size of the paper that's going to be in the book. So when you and other people who buy your book hold the book in their hand, they're going to hold something that's 8.5 by 11 inches. Alright? But to be able to accomplish that, the printing company who's going to print the book for you and put together and make it a proper book, they have to have some extra areas where they can so they can actually use the machine that cuts the paper in the exact size. So you have to add that. And in my case, I know that the printing company said if you're going to do 8.5 by 11 inches, you have to add 0.25 on top and bottom, and then you also had to add 0.625 on the width. And one other thing, of course, they wanted me to think about was, especially if I'm going to have some other objects when I'm moving over to CorelDRAW when I'm going to make this book, and that's live elements and so on, which might be like if I want to write illustration copyright Stefan Lindblad, for example, 2016. If I want to do that text, for example, in CorelDRAW, I have to think about that, so any text and everything is within the margin. Okay, so and that is actually, why is that important? Well, on this side here, for example, that's going to be, I'm going to put my illustrations on every odd page. You'll see that later on, but on every odd page. I don't want people to, let's say to the right, to the left here, that's going to be the back side of another drawing. I don't want people to have to sit and draw and coloring something on the left side. I want them to do the whole thing on the right side, which is the odd page. So so what then happen, of course, is when we talk about margins and everything, is that this is going to be the what it's called now, where you fold. I know the name, I'm just forgetting it for the moment, but actually it's going to be where the book is folded. When you flip your pages, the thicker your book is, the thicker the book is, the more narrow it's going to be for people when they open and flip the pages. So you have to have that in mind as well. I still wanted my illustrations to be a full bleed because I like that look. But some might like to have like a wide area for whatever reason, aesthetic or other reasons. But just to have that in mind. So that would be, therefore I always recommend people when they're doing a book is that if you're going to have a full bleed image, if it's going to be a letter 8.5 by 11 inches, add these extra bleed that the printing company is asking of you. So for example, 0.25 would be 50, 25 by 25 is 50, right? So I just write 50 there. And then I know that the printing company said, well, we need that extra 0.125, so that is 625. So I just add 625. How did I come up with 865? Sorry, something happened there. So how did I wind up with that? Well, the thing is actually very easy. I simply, if you bring it in your calculator, I have the standard calculator in Windows 10. So if you have, let's say, 8.5, and then just add 0.125. What do you get? Well, you get 6.625. Okay, so but that's already done. So when that's done, I could just, to help myself a little bit to be more aware when I start to draw, is to activate the guidelines and simply drag guidelines into the image. Of course, I would place these more exact and not just drag them in and drop them. I could actually do that because I know by basically where the area is going to be, what's going to be the cut, the bleed, and the trim by experience. But it's very good to use guidelines for this reason, so you know what's going to be seen in the final book and what's not going to be seen. And not going to be seen is the thing that's going to be cut. Okay, so sorry for repeating that quite a lot, but that's actually going to help you a lot when you bring your images that you draw in Corel Photo Paint and Corel Painter, when you bring them into CorelDRAW. Okay, so when I started drawing this, this guy never made it to my book. I actually wanted him to be in my book, but I had to stop somewhere. After all, I made a book with 116 pages. That's like 58, 40, 54 or 58 illustrations. That's quite a lot of work. So anyway, one way of doing this is doing like I always do. And the thing I always do is to make the object that I'm going to have as a reference, this drawing of mine that I made in my sketchbook, to just make it more transparent. So and then I need to have a black color because it's going to be a black outline. Another thing also, what I have to, I'm going to give you a tip here. If we open the brush or the paint tool in Corel Painter, one of the brushes that I use quite a lot when it's going to be this type of line work, I usually just use the you can use any art brush, custom art brush, and that's fine. But I tend to use the quick doodler quite a lot for this kind of work. I think that actually gives a pretty neat outline when it comes to inking. For example, if you, like me, sometimes do comics or something like that, or whatever kind of stuff, if you just use quick doodler, you will have something that's actually very good for inking outlines. So I would probably just use I will use quick doodler. For example, if I would go over to Painter here now and get an equivalent brush, I would then, as you can see here, use the scratchboard tool. The scratchboard tool brush is actually very good when it comes to inking also. So Control Alt key on the keyboard, and you actually make a larger or smaller nib size of your brush. So Control Alt, that's the one to use. So let's say if I would now do the same thing here, I would go to Place. So I just want to show you how different it could be and still get a really good result. I'm just gonna, and I really like, well, everyone who knows me knows that I love, yeah, I know love is a strong word, but I actually love Corel Photo Paint so much. But I also love using Painter as well. And now, for example, here we have this one here, we have that on its separate layer. You know that layers in Photo Paint is called object, and layers in CorelDRAW is called layers. So if you're new to Photo Paint, and if you're coming from the competition programs, you know that layers in that program is called objects in Photo Paint. So, okay, so and then I do the same thing here. I just create a new layer in the layers palette here, and then I use the scratchboard tool. Of course, in Painter we work very much with RGB. So in Photo Paint you can already from the start using grayscale color mode. So that's one difference, of course. So but that's easily done. So if you draw something in Painter, you could just let's say if the thing that I did after I've been drawing was that for each image, I know that I mentioned that I could open all the Painter riff files easily in PhotoPaint, and I do that many times. But I also have to mention that when the illustrations that I made, the drawings that I made in Corel Painter for this coloring book of mine, was that I actually saved it to a not a riff but a TIFF. Here you can actually see TIFF images from my own coloring book. You can see this is actually a woman who works as a barista at one of the coffee shops that is close to where I live. And here you can see actually one of the drawings that I made. I was actually making a drawing of their cookies. So what then I actually just do is to save it as a TIFF, and that's really important. So and then I just open the TIFF files made in Painter. I open them up in Painter, and then I use the batch process and converted all those illustrations that I made in Painter into grayscale, and that was like, that's so fast and easy, it's incredible. Anyway, so the basic thing here then is to, let's say if we take the zoom in here a little bit. So the basic idea is the same. So you have the scratchboard tool, and then simply, I mean, the brushes in Corel Painter are quite outstanding. I can't stress enough how fantastic it is to draw and paint and coloring for that matter it is in Corel Painter. I mean, it's really smooth, and you can of course just use any brush that suits your needs and what you're going after. So, but I mean, it's wonderful to draw with it. So if you're into comics or coloring books or gaming industry, wherever, if you're an illustrator, I really recommend having a look at Corel Painter. It's fantastic programs used by many professionals all over the world. So this is actually how I do, and I do the exact same thing in Corel Painter. So I'm just gonna, and then by pressing down the on the keyboard, I just move the spacebar. Sorry, the spacebar. By pressing down the spacebar, I can just move my drawing like this, and it's really made for artists in this sense, just like CorelDRAW and PhotoPaint is. This is basically how I did. I won't draw the whole image because I have more things to show you in this webinar. So if we now go over to, but you can see if we just zoom in here, you can see that it actually makes a really nice outline. And as long as you're drawing using 100% black, be it RGB or grayscale, you're home free, so to speak, because that's what you need. Don't go drawing in any kind of grayish. Just because we're using grayscale in PhotoPaint doesn't mean we're going to use any shade of gray or black. We're going to use fully black. So now we're doing the same here. We're going to zoom in and just going to draw this guy. I'm just going to remove that a little bit from the view, and then simply take this quick doodle that you saw that I've chosen, and then just start to draw. And as you can see, it makes a really nice outline here too, and it's absolutely perfect to inking. And one of the good things with working with both Corel PhotoPaint and Painter is that they work really good together. So anything that you create in Painter you can easily open in Corel PhotoPaint. So basically this is how I did. I made some drawings, as I said, in my sketchbook, and then simply just ink them digitally like this. I'm kind of sad that this guy didn't made it for my book, because I actually really like this pencil drawing of mine. Maybe he can come into my next or next after that coloring book, because I really like this this fella. Funny enough, I actually met one guy who looked very similar to this one, and I didn't know the guy from before, but I was going to my girlfriend's office, her work, and this guy came in there, and we said, you know what, you look pretty similar to, look like a guy that I saw at Södermalm, one of the big islands here in Stockholm. And he looked at the drawing on my website, because I have it in my portfolio online, and he said, yeah, that actually looked like me. A little bit thinner though, he said. Yeah, maybe. I said, yeah, maybe a little bit thinner, but but actually looked like this guy. So we still don't know if he actually is the same guy, but he really did look similar to this guy, and it was kind of fun. So this is one way of how I did, and now I'm going to show you the other thing. I just wanted to show you a little bit very quickly here, because maybe I should just open up here. So if you just deselect this drawing underneath here, it's important, of course, to see the result, and the result is really good when it's going to go in a book for coloring. And the size of the nib, you decide that yourself, of course, and you draw them the way you like them yourself. Always have in mind that people are going to actually coloring your book, and when they're going to coloring your book, it's actually good to have a lot of details, because people like to color details. But unless you're doing a book with tons of details, it's could also be a good thing not to. I showed this in Painter as well, by the way. So it's a good thing not to let's see here now, to add too much black. And when I say that, to not add too much black, I'm not talking about the outlines here. What I'm talking about, if let's say if you would start filling areas with black, that is of course an artistic statement, and that could actually be quite cool, and the illustration would actually look really good. But you also have to think about the person who's actually going to sit there and color. And the thing is that they might like to color that area that you have filled with black. So instead of coloring this one, maybe they wanted to have a color jacket or color shirt or whatever and thing, and then suddenly there's a lot of black there. So that might get people turn off a little bit by that, because they bought the book to color the illustration. So think of that as well. Think about the person when you're doing it. Think about the person who's going to color it. You have to give some pleasure to people who's going to color it. So again, if you would now use, for example, this is actually very important. If you now would put a lot of details here, that is not a problem. But you see that there's a lot of white there in between, and that is very calming for many people who likes to color their sit in color in their coloring books. And for example, if you haven't done any coloring in coloring books yourself, or anything like that, for example, let me take an example. I saw a woman who sat at a cafe, actually while I was working with my own coloring book. And I didn't see that she had a coloring book, and I said, oh, so she's sitting and drawing like me. No, I'm using a coloring book. Oh, cool. And then I got to talk a little bit about my own project, but especially I didn't talk so much about it. I wanted to hear what she had to say. And she said what many other people say. You know, it's she had a coffee break. She had just had lunch, and she had a coffee break at one of the local cafes that I sat So what she actually did was simply sitting there and coloring, and she was using different kind of coloring pencils and so on. And so it was calming. It's very relaxing for her to do that. And she got that time before she was going to go back to the grind at work, answering a lot of phone calls, project managing, whatever it was now she was doing. So she had that moment when she could just relax. So these small details that you draw is something where they can actually sit and just add different color. So it's absolutely not a bad idea to have a lot of details, but just think about it, not adding too much black blocks of black color and so on. Leave that a little bit to the person who actually bought the book from you. So that's really good. As you can see here now, if I would sit here and draw this drawing, I think you see how smooth it is to sit here. I'm using a Wacom pen, digital pen. You can use any brand you like, but you see how easy it is. It's the same thing like in photo paint. It's so easy to do this. So now we're gonna go over to the next step. So just gonna look at this a little bit again and zoom out. And there you go. Before I would end this one, I would add more details to this one. Okay? Okay, so now we're in PhotoPaint X8, and now we're moving over to the part when we're actually gonna put this book together. So basically for my book, I made, I think I got 58 or maybe between 57 or 58 drawings, illustrations for my book, Stockholm Urban Mix. And when we're in this situation, we have two things to think about actually. I have to make a file in CorelDRAW with all the drawings and all the text that has to be in what's called the interior. The interior of the book is the inside of the book with all the text and pictures and so on when you're flipping the pages. But I also have to do the book cover, and I'm someone who just love doing wraparound covers. And if you're going to make a cover for something that's going to be solely on the web, let's say for when you only need a front cover, you don't have to think about the spine and the back cover working together with the front cover. You don't have to think about that. But if you're going to prepare a book cover that will go to print or eventually go to print, you have to think about front, spine and back. And then you also have to think about what I mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, trim, bleed and margins. So okay, so now I mentioned that. Another thing you have to think about is when you're doing a book cover, you can make a decision on making one unique image, one unique drawing for the book cover, and you can then decide where you want lots of details or not so many details, or you can choose to go with using one of the illustrations that you made for the interior of the book, that people in this case, because it's a coloring book, people will sit and color. And I wanted to go that route because I thought about it, and I'm pretty experienced in doing book covers. I've done that for many years for many regular book publishing companies. But now when I'm doing my own indie publishing project, my whole own project from beginning to end, I felt that it would be really neat to have an image on the cover that mirrors an image inside. And the only thing that I then have to think about is, because as you've seen, you who have followed me through this webinar, all these drawings have been prepared from beginning to end to use now let's see here, grayscale. And you can see that grayscale here, you almost have to lean forward now to the screen to see that it actually says grayscale. But So what I now have to do is to convert this particular image into CMYK, and this, when you're going to print, you have to convert, regardless if it's grayscale or RGB, you have to convert the image to CMYK. And if you have, let's say if I had now worked in Corel Painter and I had painted the cover, I would have used RGB colors, and then I had to convert all the colors and so on in Corel Painter and convert it to CMYK in Corel Painter, in Corel Photo Paint. But because I decided to color this image in Photo Paint, I can simply just use the CMYK colors that I have now converted to. So that actually saves me a lot of grief and time and everything. And why do I say grief and time? The thing is that RGB has a larger color space than CMYK, and so when you think about if you're doing something in RGB, you have to do it later, convert it to CMYK. Colors don't always come out exactly how they looked in RGB, but you have enough with that. But basically, so I'm just going to drag the CMYK color palette back there to its place. So I'm going to zoom out now here, and you're going to see, as you saw while I was talking, I converted this to CMYK, and now I click to fit. So basically is I'm going to actually open this image, because what you now saw there was something that was an image that I had actually worked on previously. So I actually opened the wrong image, and you can see here now that what you actually see in front of you here is the original, how it is made for the interior of the book. You have the bicycle and you have the lunch sign. So and because I'm thinking also about the book cover's back cover, I decided to choose this little area here as the was going to be the image for my back cover. And when you look at it, I decided that these people sitting here, as well as the table, has to go. They're too busy to have them around here. And when the book is going to be printed, just in this little corner here, most probably the barcode is going to be. And then I want some text telling about the book, and another text that I'm going to show that just in a short while. So I want to use this part as the book cover's back cover image. So that means that I had, which I already done, remove these people, but also remove this part here. So basically, how do I do that? Well, we all know it's really easy. One thing was that I made a copy of this image, so I saved this in a different name, so I just saved that a little bit, and then I simply erased like this. And then I zoomed in, shift key, and drag the Wiccan pen tablet in the hand like that, and I actually zoomed in a little bit more so I could see more in detail, but I just want to show you very quickly how I made that, the principle for it, and you're going to see the end result soon. And I also did that with the people here, and I removed that. So you're going to see eventually here now how that actually looks like. So that's basically how I did that. And then of course another thing why it's so nice to color in Photo Paint. It's wonderful to color in Corel Painter, most definitely, of course, but I wanted to use CMYK colors here and really save some time. So basically is that if you have a Pantone color guide, for example, you maybe have you can maybe see colors printed on paper, because a Pantone color guide is often printed on paper, and then you can choose if you're going to have a matte paper or a glossy paper, and the book cover is going to be glossy. So let's say you would have this has to actually didn't save it to it has to be saved to CMYK. I choose the wrong, I choose RGB. It has to go to CMYK. So okay, anyway, sorry for that. If you have a Pantone color guide, then you could just take the numbers, the digits that you see next to each color swatch printed on paper, for glossy paper in that Pantone color guide, and you can actually write those numbers down here for each letter C, M, Y, K, and you're ready to go. But if you don't have that, then you could just pick any of the colors here, for example, and I'm actually going to stay with the one that I originally took just here from the color palette and show you another way you could also do. But before we color, one other thing is that because book covers and interiors, what you have to think about is what I actually told you in the beginning, and that is trim, bleed, and margins. And I've said it a couple of times now, so I repeat it again because it's so important. This book, when we hold it in our hands, is going to be 8.5 by 11 inches. But the thing is, we still need to think about the bleed and the trim, especially because the printing company who's going to print the book for you need to have the trim, where they're actually going to take the machine, let's call it like a scissor or a knife, that actually going to cut the paper. It has to be, you have to give them some paper, as I said before, so they can actually make that nice cut, and it has to be a couple of millimeters or inches. You have the measurements given to you by the printer, so you talk with them. Someone's for example, if I would like to work with millimeters, for example, although I'm now showing you inches, but if I would go with millimeters, some printers would like to have 3 millimeters, while others would like to have 5 millimeters. And 3 millimeters is not exactly 0.125, but somewhere around there. So this would actually be 625, like I mentioned before, and this one would be 11.50, 11.25 by divided by 2, so it's 11.50. But because it's a cover, and I would actually make these images for the cover larger than the ones that I'm going to use for the interior. And there's a difference here, because I'm going to use something called Power Clip, and I'm going to show you how that looks like in CorelDRAW in just a short while. But then, of course, but I'm just going to show you how I increase the size here, and you can see already here when I printed 12, I have set it to automatically change, resized. So actually, I'm in the wrong dialog. That's resample. We don't want to resize the people or the outlines. We just want to resize the size of the paper, the canvas, call it what you want. The white background, we have to get more white, more background, and not alter anything of the drawings. That would be totally wrong. So we go back here to the inches again, and then I would just go with 12, and then maybe 9 maybe. And then I want some more area up here. I could actually use the mouse cursor here, but I actually want to go more carefully here and take bottom center. So I have the image in center, a little bit more to the bottom, and then I have this area here that I know that is going to be the exact area, or just increase a little bit. So now when you see that the outlines here are a little bit cut, but that's going to be within that power clip I'm going to show you in just a short while. So now we actually have more space up here. I can actually increase that size a little bit more. And so now you see that I've freed area here, so I can put my logo here. I'm going to show that soon in just a short while in CorelDRAW. So how do I color this? Well, I basically took the colors that I've decided I wanted to use, and then press here in the color palette, or go over here to the toolbar and pick something here. So this is the one that I'm going to choose now. If you have a Pantone color guide, you can just add your numbers here for each color, so you know that it's exactly the same color that you're going to have printed on paper, and glossy paper in this case, later on. Okay, now let's see. So basically what I did was to just create a new object. It's called object in Photo Paint, as you know, and not layers like it's called in Corel Painter and CorelDRAW. So then I just add it like this here. And another thing here is I'm one of those who like to use merge modes, like these: multiply, if darker, if lighter, and saturation, and so on. And for this one, maybe I would have chosen multiply, because why am I talking about that? Well, in this area up here, I would probably like to have a little bit darker, a darker color here. So you see that when I add multiply, you see that actually changes the color here. I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to have something else, but you can actually sit and use the arrow keys on your keyboard and see which effect that might work for you. I like to stress something, make you aware of something. Let's say if you would actually have an RGB color space image made in either Photo Paint or Corel Painter, and you want to and you've converted that image from RGB to CMYK, it could mean, in some cases, not always, but many cases, it could actually mean that the merge modes and effects looks different when converted to CMYK. So after the initial shot, you would actually have to sit and fix that. So but although I like merge modes, if I could actually just pick another color, I would actually do like this and just pick something that is a little bit darker, and then I would just click that, and that actually works quite well, and then I get the color that I want. Okay, and then of course you're also going to see in the picture soon that I picked a color that it was more like a brick. I thought that this could actually work, but then I felt like maybe I should have a little bit more power to it. So I would actually just add a little bit more red, and a little bit more intense. That may be a little bit too bright. Somewhere here, maybe. You'll see the end result in just a short while, just in a moment. But this is basically how I did, and then I left some areas white. You can see how it eventually looks like, to just give that feeling of colors and markers and pens and going over the outline, so it looks a little bit more handmade, if you would like. So this is basically how I did. I could sit and work very much more and sit here and just use the eraser tool and erase that. That's easy peasy, but I wanted some going over here to just give us a feeling, another feeling to it. So okay, so when I did that, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here now, see to fit. Then I basically, because now it's CMYK, as you can see up here, and if you want to make a final check, you could just go here and see that it says it's 300 dpi. You haven't done anything wrong to it while you've been working, and then simply use the export. And when you're using export, choose TIFF bitmap, and also I stress that you use embed color profile. That would actually be very good. And you can also see here what's really good. When you embed the color profile, you see that in this case it would add 1.74 megabytes, so the image would look a little bit, actually get a little bit heavier, but it's still not much. But the more color you put into the image, the more megabytes a color profile that is embedded will increase the size of the image. But don't see that as something hysterical over that. That's actually quite okay, because embed a color profile will actually make it easier for the printing company you're working with to actually be sure that you gave them the right color profile. It's much better the whole way. So see that as your best friend. Okay, so now we're going to go over to... Now we're in CorelDRAW X8, and I'm going to show you pretty fast here now, because it's pretty straightforward how you create a book cover, and for that matter in an interior file with multiple pages in CorelDRAW. Of course, it's always easier when you know how to do it, so we all knew in the beginning. This image is actually inside what's called a power clip, and you can see that here in the object manager where it's selected. It says power clip curve, and basically what it was is that I took a rectangle that I then converted to curve, but the power clip itself was created, as I mentioned, by a rectangle. I'm going to show you how that is done. But in this cover here, is what's important here is that of course I used guidelines in the beginning, and I set up the guidelines so in the exact size or settings that was needed by the printer, so they get the document that they wanted. And if you look at these guidelines here, they actually show the edge of the document, if I can call it that way. Nothing is supposed to be outside of this document. If everything is within this rectangle here now, the document will be perfectly ready and go to print as a PDF print ready document. So the way to do that is to, for example, you can do this without the rectangle created into power clip if you like that. That's perfectly okay. I just like power clip. There are two reasons for that. One is that if I would have an image that would actually be larger than the size of the rectangle, when I place it inside the power clip, that would actually see to that it's inside the power clip, so nothing goes outside. But because the image is larger than the rectangle, I would have to sit and adjust that a little bit. So what I then do is to create a image, two images, and I put them together into one image file in Photo Paint. So first make the first image, and then I make the second image, and then I make a file where both are put together like this. So and if I now go over here and right click the image, because the image is actually the same as the power clip here now, I'm just gonna put it, and you see that it wind up straight ahead in the power clip, and that's really nice in many ways. But let's go over to this file here then. So what you basically do is you just choose the fonts that you want, the text that you need, and the different titles, and then you put your little imprint or logo. And as you can see that I mentioned earlier when we were in Photo Paint and Painter, when I was talking about the images, you can see that in this area here, it's although there are outlines here, it's not too busy, and there is an area where the printer who wanted to put the barcode, it was very easy for them to put the barcode over here. I could have put the barcode myself and created the barcode in CorelDRAW, but the printer wanted to use their type of barcode. So I left this area for them so it was easy for them to put it there. So keep that in mind when you're making a book cover. As you saw, I removed the bike here, for example. Then it was easier for me to add more details to this image and make it more suitable as a cover illustration. And when this was done, I basically went to File, Publish to PDF, and choose Prepress. I always go to, although I can choose Prepress down here, I always go to Settings, and in Settings I get a warning here now that says 2 issues. Document contains small fonts. Well, this document is already done, and so we don't have to think so much about it. But anyway, if there would be something wrong here, as it it will give you a warning here in this tab. Then you have the possibilities to go back and see if there's something that has to be removed or changed. I don't have to think about security because I don't want to have a password PDF. And then Prepress, have this in mind and talk with the printer. Maybe you should untick, deselect this bleed limit here, because this will add limit to your document, and I made a document with bleed when I had added the bleed already, so I don't need extra bleed. So have that in mind. If you make an image in a document that is exact with the bleed and trim and everything, see to that you don't tick this, because that will add more bleed. And then objects, you see information you might need here. Personally, I always, of course, my name is here, but usually I just click a comma and then I add my website, www, and then maybe my email or my phone number, and then keywords. People can easily search for this PDF among all their files. But I always add some contact information if people at a print shop somewhere, or an editor or a client need to get in hold of me and they open the PDF. If they know how to do it, they just go to properties, settings in PDF, file, properties, and then they will find the information there. Color, here I see that it is that it have embed color profile, and this is really important, that it embeds color profiles. And then of course it's something else we have to find here, because I'm using Prepress. It should, yeah, here. And in objects, I was a little bit too fast previously here. You see that it says text and fonts. Do not deselect these. Keep these selected, because your printer will love you for it, because this will make everything easier. Because you have text in your document, you want all these text and the fonts that you're using, especially that the fonts that you are using are embedded within this file. That would make it easier for the printer to take the exact same version or whatever font that you're using. That is so important to know. Okay, so that was the cover, and now we're quickly going to go over to the interior file that I made also in CorelDRAW. Okay, so here we have the interior file. This is the interior file from my own book, and you can see down here it says it has 116 pages. If I would now just simply flip pages here, you would see that down here we have a tab number 2, and that's for copyright information there that I wanted into the book, and tab number 3, which is the page 3, is the dedication, when I was giving credits to people that I want to thank. And then tab number 4 is an empty page, because it's the back side of the dedication page actually. And then 5 is the introduction text to my book and why I've made this book and so on. And then there's a blank page, and then there is first page with illustrations. So what is that about? Well, here's the thing. When I create this document, I create it as single page documents, but it's a multi-page document. If it was needed, I could make a document with facing pages, but in this case I know with information from the printer, they only wanted to have a PDF document with multiple pages, but every page is supposed to be, let's call it a single page document. It's not a single page document, because that would actually just mean one page, but it's a multiple pages but no facing pages. So and so how do we do this? Well, before we move on and show you how I created that, actually really easy. I just want to show you by using page sorted view. This little icon here on the property bar, I actually put that myself, customized it, but you can also find it through view and then page sorted view. In front of me, if I may make it a little bit smaller here now, you can see here now all the pages that are in my document, from page number well, actually page number 1, as you can see here, title page. You see also the name. I gave this over here a name, title, page interior. You see that then wind up here, and the same thing with copyright. You see it here. So it's very easy by looking at the object manager and here in the page sorter view or in the document when it's in the normal state. It's very easy to view it. What this actually does by viewing, for me in a way, the way I like to work, when I'm working with a multi-page document like this one, I wanted to make sure, because it's very easy to make a mistake, I wanted to make sure that it was easy for me to see exactly when, which pages my drawings are going to be on. And I want my coloring book to be a book where number 7, for example, that's an odd number, and 6, like you see here, is an even number. And in this book, every odd page is the page where I'm going to have content, for example, my illustrations that people are going to color. And I want them to be on the right side. When you open a book, you have a left side and you have the right side. Every odd page is a right side. So every even page will be a blank page when we start with drawings on the odd page to the right. You can see here, for example, the title page is an odd page, copyright is an even. I've decided to have the text here to be printed over on the back side, because there's no problem with that. So you can see it like normally, like a book is. But after the dedication, it's also kind of a tradition when you write a novel or whatever it is to have a blank page after the dedication. And then it looks very neat and very nice to have nothing that competes or distracts you when you're going to read what is going to be the introduction to this book, for example. But then again, we have the back side of number 5 will be page number 6. So here I can see exactly in between each image is going to be a blank page. So image, blank, image, blank, image, blank. So it's even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, and all the way down to page number 116. So you get that. Okay, so how do we create that? Well, actually, we can start by creating a document, because first just name the document, and then you just choose a document which is the letter size. And what I actually did there was actually change the landscape. It was actually set to be landscape, so I added, just choose letter, and it flipped over to portrait. And then you see by default it always open with one page, unless you have created a document previously. And let's say if I made a document with 2 pages or 3 pages, it would actually show 2 or 3 in this number of pages. But you just, in this case I wanted 116 pages, so I just write 116. I leave it at with CMYK and 300 dpi. I can also see which color profiles that are being used, and these are the standard ones, so I don't have to make any changes there. And so we're ready to go actually. But before we go and say we're ready to go, what we actually have to add here are the trim. And the trim, I believe, was to get the actual trim size, the outer edges of the final document is going to be 50 here. And when I write 50, that's actually, I have the page and I add 0.25 on the top and 0.25 at the bottom. Those two together makes 11.50. So and then we have the width. The default is 8.5. That's the final size when they cut the page. But to add the bleed that goes over to the trim, so to speak, to make it very simple here, we just add 625. And why 625? Well, that's what I've that's the size that I have, of course, and then I just click the document. And so now we have with the trim, but now what we also have to think about are these, and I'm going to write it up so you can see them clearly, because there are a couple of things here that are important, larger here. We have the binding. Sorry, what happened there? We have the binding, we have the trim, bleed, and margin. These are very important things. If I would make a binding, would actually be this one here, and actually trim is also, but trim is actually also all these sides of the document, while binding is only here in the middle. And binding is when you fold the pages in a book, the middle of the book where the papers are stuck together, that's the binding. And then of course you have the bleed and the margin. You can see that it says 0 here, so I'm just gonna write a 0 there, so that winds up correctly. And then I'm actually gonna add 0.75, because I got from the printer that they wanted the margin to be 375. So now we have the margin. That's actually really important. If you now go back to my multi-page document, you know this one here that I just put up here, which is the margin. If you go back here, we'll see that this one, that's actually that one. Something have happened here. It's just moved to 378, but it should be 375 anyway. So, but what I also added, here's the thing. The printer said if I'm going to have anything that's called what they called live elements, let's say for the image itself is not a live element per se, but the text, which is a curve, which I've converted to a curve, is so-called live element, because I can edit them, so to speak. And they don't want anything to be on that side of the red guideline, which is the margin. So as long as it is here, you're fine. But I actually wanted to be extra sure, and I also thought that visually it was good that if the copyright and the elements here could be placed on this area here. So I actually added a guideline, so I have this guideline even as a measurement for being inside the margin. And this is actually really important, because when you're working with printers, unless they actually creating the document for you, which they basically never does if you don't pay them, they won't accept anything unless you're within the margin. So have that in mind, because that's the margin. If you put up the margin, and then you just add everything within this margin, which is, in my case, I made these guidelines here, for example. If we go down here, I actually made these guidelines into a red color. So everything, so I could instantly see what it was. So everything that has to be within that margin are within these red guidelines. The image, on the other hand, I wanted what's called a full bleed. So they just have to be the exact same size as the trim. And what it also means is that this area here, this size, here's the trim, and this little, you see that it says 125 here, for example. Everything that's within this 125 are subject to be cut off when they're trimming the with bleed and everything. So anything that's inside here might not show up, or basically won't be. It will be printed on a paper, but when they before they send the book to you, that will actually be cut off. So those are actually very important things. And if you get these things right, and if you do them correctly, you're actually ready to go, and you will actually have created a multi-page document in CorelDRAW, and then just send it to print. And again, you do the same thing as you did with the cover. You go to Publish to PDF, you choose Prepress, and then disregard that it says 3 issues here, because things happen when I'm doing the webinar. And then you see that it says current document. What's important for you is to take pages, because you want all these pages to be together in this PDF document. And then you have color here, and then you add information here if you need that, and keywords, and then objects. You see that even here it has the embed, the fonts, and then of course you have to, in my case I deselected bleed because I already added bleed to my document, so I don't need any additional bleed, and then clicked OK, and that created my PDF document. So basically that basically concludes the whole webinar. And so if you do as I said in this webinar, and I hope I didn't miss anything, but if you follow me through here, I'm pretty sure that you will be able to create your own brilliant coloring book for grown-ups. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.